Welcome everybody to today's medical device marketing podcast. So this is actually a really interesting session we have today. This is talking about how to prepare for videography. So when somebody actually, or when you have a camera crew who's going to come to film either your device or interviews or things like that, what should you do in front of that to make sure you're fully prepared? And there's loads of things that you should do. And actually, I think this is a really informative podcast because we send out lists of all these things up front, and it can make a huge difference to how your podcast goes. So we're obviously Podymos. We are a medical device marketing agency. And our job is to make sure that everything goes totally smoothly during a filming day. So I'm joined here with Becca, who's our account director, who runs an awful lot of these filming days. Welcome, Becca.
Hello.
Hello. And so I'm going to run through with you, Becca, or we're going to talk through all the things that people should be thinking about. And we'll try and do it in a chronological order. But stick through this because this will make a huge difference to your filming days. And it'll make a huge difference because things won't go wrong. You'll get the footage you need. And at the end, you'll have much better outputs as a result of it. So let's get started. So Becca, the first thing I'm going to talk about is when we first do a filming day. So we will send an agenda up front. We'll send a filming guide so that everybody knows exactly what's happening during that day. But it's extremely important that everybody who's involved reviews that agenda. Why is this so important, Becca?
Because with filming days, we're trying to fit in as much as physically possible into a day or 2 days. And that becomes kind of like running a military operation. And it means that everybody needs to know exactly where they need to be. You need to know who's doing what before you get there, because otherwise you're all going to be standing there staring at each other like, so who does what now when we get there? And that wastes so much time. I think the thing that always surprises people is how long setups take. I think, a setup can take, anywhere from an hour to 2 hours per scene, depending if the light's behaving or not behaving, if you have to bring extra things, extra equipment in. And that does take a lot of time. So you need to be able to get that planned and prepared for, because especially where you're using natural daylight, you need to be maximizing that. So if you're wasting an hour working out everything, that causes a lot of problems, especially when you need daylight.
Totally. Yes. And when we have a look at setups, so how many setups? Well, we can normally do 3 setups in a day. And you mentioned there that it takes, I think people are often really surprised as you're saying how long a setup takes. So the first setup can take an hour and a half, maybe even 2 hours, depending on the things you spoke about. And the next set of setups tend to be less. So 3 setups is the maximum that you can do in a day. So that comes to another point, because then you need to make sure that you know everything that you need to capture in that setup, because it won't go necessarily in the order of your video. So that's why it's so critical that everybody has seen the storyboard and the script, and that's fully signed off. So it's probably really interesting for people to hear how we actually run this. So if you talk a little bit about how do we actually run a day? So once we've got the storyboard and the script done, what does that day look like? What could people expect?
Yeah, so I think we could talk about the storyboard and the script in a minute a lot more. But when it comes to how that looks like on the day, what we would have done is we'd have looked at that storyboard before, and if, say, we're doing multiple team members speaking to the camera, if we know that we want, let's use our team for example, Claudia and Jenna both speaking about a topic in setup 1, even if that's video potentially 1 and 5, we need to make sure that in setup 1 we know Claudia, Jenna, Jude are all speaking on a topic in that setup. And then setup 2, this Chris, me and Gamzee are speaking in that setup. It means that you can ensure that you're getting the right thing. So there's nothing worse than you break down a setup and then go, oh, Jude is supposed to speak in that setup, because that's an hour and a half.
Well, you
gone.
can't do it.
You can't do it. It's
well,
done.
You can't do it. You can't do it. Then you've broken the whole day. And actually, this is even more important when it comes to product. So,
Yeah.
like, there's a certain thing about speaking with people. You might be able to squeeze a person into another setup and go, okay, that's fine. We'll have to work with that. That's fine. But
Hmm.
when you're talking about product, then that's a whole different story.
Definitely, because there's some, especially if you're doing product explainer videos, you know, it might, at
Yeah.
storyboard wise, it might at the beginning of the video, you might be talking about turning a device on, and at the end of the video, you might be talking about turning the device off. You know, you want that turning on and turning off to look identical, so it's a nice closing of the video if it mirrors the opening. But that setup of how the device looks when you're turning it on will have taken you an hour and a half to film. So you need to also
Yeah.
film turning the device off at that moment. Because if you don't and
Yeah.
you get to the end of the storyboard, you're going to really be sad because you're not going to get the exact same setup. Because even if you try and get the exact same setup, you're going to spend hours being going, right, was the device in this spot, or was it slightly more to the left, was it slightly more to the right? And that just burns
Mm.
so much time. So it's product videos, it's essential for you to work out exactly what every shot needs to look like, and then what those when each individual shot needs to be filmed in which setup. And I would
Mm.
say 90% of the time that isn't done chronologically to the storyboard, because it would be amazing if that could happen, but it just is unrealistic that your storyboard chronologically also works with your scene setups. So that's why when we send over the running of the day, we normally say like scene number and then setup number. So when you come in at maybe halfway through after lunch, be like, oh, we're at the end of the video, we're nearly done. You can be like, actually, we might not nearly be done. We might still be in setup one, but we've just happened to be filming a scene from the end of the video. So yeah,
Mm.
knowing your schedule is really
Mm.
important. We always have a call up front and run exactly through the scene and exactly through the storyboard and explain to you exactly what's running. And then we keep you updated throughout the day as well. So you'll see the scene, you'll see what the shot looks like on a small portable iPad or screen. So you can see exactly how it's going.
And then we also have the script. So, what's the importance of the script? Because a lot of people might think, actually, we can just do the script afterwards. It's not that important. Don't worry about it. What's the importance of the script? Because this is really interesting, I think. And I don't think people realize how important this is until they actually see the filming happening. And then why you can't suddenly just change the script all around afterwards.
There's two key things for me with a script. One is that you need to have markers for what you want to achieve in your video. So again, if you're talking about a product, there's certain things that are in your IFU that you have to talk about, or if you're even talking to a patient testimonial or anything like that, there's certain things you want a person to talk about. And it's really important that you have a script so that you know that. Now, we never really ask people to talk through a script because that seems disingenuous. What we do is then we break that script down into questions, and then we have another member of the team going, great, they talked about that product's feature, great, they talked about that experience. We mark off that they've hit all the points that we need them to. And that means you get all the content and you don't get the video in post production and go, oh, they didn't talk about that. We really need to talk about that. Or regulatory is going to be really angry because they've not said that correctly. You have that all up front. But then also, especially for patient testimonial videos, you're going to have B-roll. And if you've not run through the script and someone starts talking about how, you know, that using this device means they get to live a normal life again, they're back playing golf or they're back playing tennis, um, that would be footage that you want B-roll for. But if they say that half an hour before the end of filming day 2, you're not getting
Yeah.
that B-roll. That B-roll does not exist.
Oh, actually, in all fairness, even if they say that at the end of day one, you're like,
Yeah,
crikey, how are we going to get that? Because the whole day is planned out. So it
whole
has to
days.
be planned out up front. Otherwise,
Exactly.
you're going to have something that doesn't make sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and you'll just be kicking yourself because, you know, there is filming days take a lot of planning, they take a lot of resource and cost, and then if you're not maximizing them
Mm.
in the best way possible, you don't get the best possible video. So especially with patient
Yeah.
testimonial videos, we don't want people to be prepped too much because we want to feel like we're capturing their story for the first time on video, but we still definitely want to run through a broad version. We had a really great example recently, and they talked about an activity they did all the time that came out on our pre-call, and the whole team were like, we have to film that, we have to get that as B-roll. And
Yeah.
actually, that part of the video was the bit that moved everybody the most. And if we didn't have that pre-call to run through it with the patient, we'd have missed that, and then the video wouldn't have tied together as lovely as it did, which is why it's really important to have that script. So yeah, the two things: making sure you get everything and making sure you have control.
I think one thing we haven't spoken about with the script is when you're talking about product demonstration videos, because when we said we don't use the script in the video, we do use the script when it comes to product demonstration videos, and that's so that we know exactly how long each bit of footage needs to be. So it's really important that if you are doing a product demonstration, that script is up front, because otherwise the worst thing happens, that you end up getting to the editing suite, and the thing about video, if you don't have it, you don't have it. There's no way of getting around that. So you really need to make sure, or if the video is too short, so your section of the generator spinning is too short, there's no way of covering that up. You can't just slow it down. It doesn't work that way. So the script is really critical to make sure that you get the right amount of footage for each part of the script that you're going to say, and also you know what you're going to film from that to sort of match that script, as you were saying.
Yeah, and with the script as well, it's really important that that script is seen and signed off by everybody. What you don't want is to film the script that's
Yeah.
just seen maybe just by the marketing team or just a sales team, and then a product manager sees the video and goes, well, actually, that's not how I really want people to be using the product, or actually, you're not meant to press this button before you press that button. Because, like you say, if you don't have the footage of you pressing button 1 before button 2, you don't have the footage. So before we step on set for a product demo, that script needs to be completely signed off. Otherwise, you're just going to cause headache later. And it just sometimes script and storyboard. Sometimes it's back to the drawing board if you don't have those things right, which can, be a nightmare, really.
Well, and at a huge cost as well, because you have to go and refilm it, the inconvenience of all of it as well for the client as well. Yes, it becomes quite a nightmare. Okay, so Becca, here's a bit of a fun thing that you only really know when you do it. And once you've done it, you will never do it again. Crew clothing. So actually, it's really important that as crew and team members, and that includes everybody who's in the set, wears darker colours. Why is that, Becca?
Yeah, so especially for product demonstrations, if you've got a product and you're wearing a bright color, that color can reflect onto the device, and then the device will look a different color. And what often happens then is you get it into post-production and the team will be like, oh, the device doesn't look the right color. And there's nothing you can do about that, really. So it's really important that you're in muted, dark colors, all the crew, everyone on set, so that there's none of that reflection happening onto the device. It is something that you should also think about for patient testimonials. Things like checks and stripes sometimes don't pick up great on camera, but it's mainly more of an issue when you've got sort of demo product filming.
Yeah, totally. And we've actually had that happen recently, where we had that exact thing happen because we wore bright green clothing, which we will not do again.
Yeah,
so we had to quickly change that.
Yeah, the other thing to think about there actually is like long sleeves. It's something that we've seen a problem as well. Like if you've got sleeves that are, ending like even as high as this, it means that every time you're reaching in, you're getting a different shot of your sleeve. So we actually recommend that, especially if you have hands coming in, to have like short sleeves on, because then that makes it easier and you don't have to constantly be worrying about, sleeves not looking good in the film as well.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so here's another really good tip that we talk about. It's very tempting sometimes when people are going to speak on camera. It can be really nerve-wracking to start speaking on camera when you're not used to it. So sometimes people like to have auto cues. We can do auto cues. We don't recommend auto cues, and Becca will talk about that now. But it's really how you prepare. If you're going to speak on camera, how do you prepare well to do it so that you can be as natural as physically possible. And actually, I'll jump in straight away, Becca, before we go into actually what we can do. One of the really cool tips, which actually I used yesterday, was to first of all stand up, walk around a room, and actually move your arms up and down, because that actually releases endorphins, and it makes you feel more confident on camera. So I often find that makes a really big impact for somebody who's about to go on camera, just because it gets the adrenaline flowing, and so it sort of comes across with a more natural, vibrant presentation. But Becca, what are the other things that people can do when they're about to go on camera to make sure they're fully prepared and they don't come across like they're reading, because that often isn't great?
Yeah, so we don't recommend, like you said, like a teleprompter for that exact reason. It looks like you're reading, and it's really hard to read teleprompter and not, and also especially give off the emotion that you want to be giving off. It's a skill that a lot. It's really hard to
Mm,
do that. So what we recommend when we break that script down is we break it down into questions, so that a person stands behind the camera and you're just having a conversation. And I actually asked the person that's being interviewed to not prep too much, to not look at those questions up front. And the reason that I do that is because when you do that, you can actually see them retry it in their brain, going, what was that thing I said the last time I prepped this? And you can see
mm,
all of that happening on a person's face. So what I actually recommend is, once the script and all the points have been signed off, the person on camera doesn't look at it again. It's the person behind the camera's job to make sure that we have all those markers and we have the right questions.
mm.
And then we can ask the person on camera, and then it feels more genuine and it comes across like a conversation. And like we mentioned about getting all the markers, that same person is ticking off that they said the right thing. That person is also
Mm.
making sure they're not umming and ahhing, because you don't want any of that pressure to be on the person on camera. You want them to feel like they're just having a conversation with their friend, because that just comes across nicer than you watching somebody's eyes go through.
Yeah, and this is actually why it often takes quite a while. Product filming takes a long time to actually get the right shot each time, especially when you have models in there and things like that. But interviews also take a really long time, and it's because people very rarely sit in front of the camera and just talk correctly to start off with. It's just not the way it works. So you often have, 2 or 3 pre-runs before then you get the right shot. So that also adds to the timing. So when people think, oh yes, we can capture a huge amount in a day, we'll always make sure we capture as much as physically possible. But you're always limited by that, because you also want people to feel comfortable and to give their best performance when they're on camera as well,
Yeah, and
which is
something
our
that
job. That's our job. Our job is to make sure people do that.
And yeah, something that I also like doing is they'll when you're doing setups, the camera crew will set it, like, will get 95% of the way with the setup before the person filming comes in. But the last little bit, and there'll be
Mm,
someone that sits in, a crew member that sits in and makes sure all the lights working. But for that last sort of 5% of getting things ready, we do need the person sitting there just to make sure that the kite's still right and all of that. And I actually asked the crew to start filming at that point, and just start talking to the person filming then, because it means that there's not a and camera on moment, and that kind of takes
yeah.
the pressure off as well, because they, as soon as they're in the seat, they start kind of loosening up a little bit. Whereas yeah, I do find that when you go turning the camera on in 3, 2, 1, like, it, you watch the panic.
It's
So I
it's
don't do.
true, and actually people do change in how they go from being really bubbly and really sort of easygoing to totally different as soon as the camera changes on. So actually, that's a really good tip, just to get people talking in a
Yeah,
really casual way and more relaxed.
and yeah, and during that
Great.
time.
So right, oh sorry.
Sorry. And during that time, it'll be talking about things that we're not talking about on camera. So it'll be things like your holiday, or
Yeah.
your dog. If there's a dog, trust me, I'm talking about the dog. It will just be something really light-hearted that you enjoy talking about. And that kind of eases you into, when I start asking questions about the
Yeah.
product or your experience, we've kind of been talking already, and that makes it easier.
So the next thing to think about, and this is a really good thing to think about up front, but normally we end up doing it when we get there. But it's filming locations. So where are the best places to film? How do we normally do this when we start in a day, Becca?
Yeah, so we know where we're filming obviously before we get there, in the sense of like a location, either a patient's house or an office. And so what we then and we
Mm,
know how many locations we want. But when we first get there, a member of the team, normally myself and our main camera guy, will walk around and be like, "Will this work? Will this work?" And we pick the three spots. And what we're looking for when we do that is, what does the lighting look like? What does the background look like? Is there enough going on in the background, but not too much going on in the background? um we want natural light, but often we don't want the window directly behind you, because if the light's changing behind you, that's going to be really
Oh, but
noticeable.
I have to
I
say,
love
I disagree with that. I
Yeah.
love light behind. So I know it's much harder because we need to flood the scene with light, but that's our job to do that. But I
Mm,
love the movement outside of windows. So I'm always a huge fan of putting people against windows because you get the greenery outside and you get a bit more interest and depth. I absolutely love it. I always prefer to do it that way, although I know it's a lot more challenging,
yeah.
but it does end up looking fantastic.
Or what I do as well is, I don't have if I have a window behind, I try and not have a window directly behind. I try and have like, so
Mm,
you're sitting on a sofa, the window's like the side at the side, so it's poking through. But it's all about then flooding it with light as well, and it needs to be really,
yeah.
really bright. And it's also again about just making sure you have enough interest in the background, like you said, with
Mm,
greenery, or when you're in someone's house, often there's like little knickknacks and stuff that are on shelves and books. All of
yeah.
that's really important, but also making sure it looks neat on camera, because
Mm,
and that's why you'll see us with an iPad, and you know Alex will be moving things around on scene, but I'll be looking at it on the iPad, because it might look fantastic in person, but when you're on camera, things there's a shadow in a certain way, or things just can look a bit messy. So that's what we're
mm.
doing, is we're making sure the background looks beautiful, so that when you come in, you look great in it.
Yeah, and the final sign off, whenever that's always signed off by whoever is leading the project. So we're only there to make everything get everything ready for then it to be signed off
Yeah.
before that starts. But that's always a good thing to think about filming locations. And I think if you do like the look of filming outside the window, like I do all the time, you've just got to let your film crew know because they're not often going to bring enough light to be able to do that because you need to counteract it from both sides. Otherwise, it doesn't work. It doesn't work at all, and you end
Yeah.
up with a really bad picture. So you just need to make sure you let your film crew know if you do want to film outside of a window.
And also on
Good.
that, about
Okay.
film
So sorry. Yes.
Also, on other things to let your film crew know is how many camp shots you want in that setting. If you want a front
Yeah.
on and a side on, which is really, really nice, because it means you can just swap
Mm.
the camera angles. It's really great for when you're editing. You need to you need to let the team know, because that will depend on where they set up. Because if you have like a camera here and a camera here, you'll be careful. Otherwise, camera one's going to pick up camera two, which you don't want. And that's so you out, or where the lighting goes, making sure the lighting doesn't get picked up by either
But
camera, like that.
that's our job, right?
That is
So
our job,
it
100%.
is also that's totally the team who are working with you to do your filming. That's their job to also suggest what's going to be best. So one,
Yeah,
two cameras, normally as you say, two cameras is always better. Really good lighting is always better. Yeah, but that's definitely the camera team's job to do that.
definitely. Yeah.
Good. Okay, so this is the next thing we're going to talk about is something that trips everybody up if they haven't planned for it, and that is preparation of your device. Um, there's a lot of things that can go wrong with this, and once they go wrong, it can really delay filming. So it's really worth thinking about these before you ever get to the location. Becca, what are these things that we really need to think about the device? And never forget these because these will trip you up every single time.
Um, the big ones are any software updates. If you've got a device
Yeah.
that it just make sure all your software updates are done. And there's a few different reasons for this. You don't want a screen coming up halfway through filming being like, time to update software, or you don't want to film everything, get it back, and then somebody say, oh, that's not what the device settings look like anymore because we've had a software update, because then all that footage is not usable. And the second is charge your device. Like your device needs to be on 100% charge when you walk in, if it requires charge. Because if you get halfway through filming and then you get that low battery sign, or even worse, it turns off, there's nothing you can do. You've got to wait for it to charge.
Well, there is. You can put a cable in the back of your device, which is just not what you want to do, especially
No.
if it's a mobile device.
Yeah.
So so absolutely charge all software updates, and this does happen. So we've had many a filming day where we've done maybe even a whole day of filming, because a product demonstration video is 2 days, always 2 days filming, easy. Just because the setups take so long for product demonstrations. And we've had happen many times, either the midpoint of the first day or even the end of the first day, someone comes to us and says, the software is out of date, can you just edit it afterwards? And it's not possible, because you have everything moving. It means you'd have to edit every single scene, every single frame within a video, and just the time to do that, it's much cheaper to refilm the whole thing. So yes, software updates are huge. And the last one is device imperfections. Our cameras will pick up everything. So if you have any slight lines on the device, if you have any small imperfection, especially if we're using a macro lens or something, you're going to see it. And especially when you shine light off a device as well, if it has any shiny surface and there's a scratch on that surface, it's going to show up really heavily. So make sure, a really big thing is make sure you get a new device for filming and you check that device before you start, because you'll really kick yourself if we start filming, and we'll check it as well. We'll make sure the device is looking amazing. But if we have to then delay filming because the device has an imperfection, that's going to be really frustrating. So I think that's probably maybe even the number one thing we see, device imperfections, before we start doing device filming. And we normally capture these up front because we ask the devices to be sent to us beforehand. But where we don't get them beforehand, this is a big problem that we encounter. So that's a really good thing to keep in mind. So what if you're using a model, Becca? So if you're going to have a device, you're also going to have a model, as in a person who's going to be showing how to demonstrate the device. That can either be a member of your team, or it can be a member of our team, or it can be a model that you pay to come in. There's lots of different options. But there's certain things you need to prepare to make sure that everything runs totally smoothly, especially if you use a member of your team. Because this might not be something they're used to doing all the time. Becca, what do we need to do, or what does everybody need to do to make sure they fully prep team members before modeling a device, before demonstrating a device?
Yeah, I think it's worth saying that if our team member is going to be the model, we do all of this. But if your team member is going to be the model, it's really important that they're prepped up front. And what we're looking to be prepped on is using the device. So yes, we will have a voiceover. We'll be talking through each shot. But if I say, go to the home screen and you see the finger going, okay, there, that doesn't look good on camera. Like the model needs to know that's where the home screen is, that's where this button is. Otherwise, it doesn't look as smooth as it should do on camera. The other thing to be really thinking about is that your hands are going to be very much on camera. So having, neat nails. So for anyone that has nail polish, like it's better to not have any nail polish and have like just a French cleaned manicured nails. Or if you're going to be in a sterile field, making sure we have gloves, and that's something that we'll talk about and we can bring. So just making sure that those hands look exactly how you want them to look, because that is what you're going to be seeing alongside the device. And lastly, clothing, which we talked about a little bit earlier, but do you want people in a lab coat? Do you not want them in a lab coat? If you don't want them in a lab coat, do you want them, how much do you want a sleeve to be seen? Do you want gloves on? Do you want, all of that needs to be thought about, because if you get on site and the model's not wearing what you want them to be wearing, it's a bit of a problem.
It's a problem. Or if what you have for the model is not the right size, that's another bit of a problem, because then we need to do some very clever adjusting, tailoring, which is not our specialist area, on site, to make sure everything fits. So it is good thinking about all these things that are going to go wrong and how do we stop them going wrong. The the practicing the movements is actually a really important one, because I think it's really easy for people to think, yes, I know how to do that. Yes, I know how to do that. But it's a lot about muscle memory. And so actually going through the script and saying, right, now I'm going to go here, and you move a lot slower as well when you're doing a product video. So you can't be shaking. And what we find often when people do this for the first time is because they haven't practiced that muscle memory that they need in order to do each of the movements, they can shake a little bit, and that delays things, because then we need to keep doing it until they can stop shaking. And it's a natural thing. People get nervous when they're on camera. So if you practice those movements, you know everything you need to do when you need to do it. You don't panic, and actually you don't get that shaking. So it runs a lot faster. So it's much more than just knowing what you need to do. It's actually practicing that as well, so that when you get on camera, you can do it straight away, and then you can capture as much as possible in that day.
Yeah, and on that, if you're doing unboxing at any point as well, it's really important that you've decided where everything's going to lay. So once I take it out of the box, where am I putting it? What you don't want is, okay, I take out my IFU from the
Yes.
box, and then the model standing there like, okay, where does it go? All of that needs to be, and that is something that we will do before the shot, whether our team member or your team member is the model, we'll do a practice of that, because where they all lay out is important for the camera shot, but all of that stuff needs to be prepped up front.
Totally. And if you want branded clothing, did you just say that?
No.
Or no, sorry. If you need, I thought you just said that. If you need branded clothing, so if you want your model to wear, something with your logo on and things like that, that also needs to be prepped up front. And often that can take quite a lot to order, quite a long time to order. So that could even be 3 to 4 weeks to arrive. So yeah, it is all these things up front. Very important. I feel like we've missed something, but we have gone through everything that we normally prep for when we do a filming day. And these are the really important things that I think will trip people up during a filming day. So it's important to remember these. If you had to summarize, Becca, the top 3 things that make a filming day go well, if people took away 3 things from this podcast, what would they be?
Being prepared with your script and your storyboard is my number one.
Yeah. And everything signed off by
Everything signed,
everybody.
but everything signed off by
Yeah.
everybody. Everybody that's on set, knowing what their role is on set and what they're doing is really important. If we send you all like the time frames and who's doing what, and that's really important, because filming days get really busy. And like I said at the beginning, they're a military operation. You need to know who's doing what, otherwise you waste time. And then lastly, I think it's just about making sure that everyone, the model or the person speaking, is fully prepared and comfortable, and knows what they need to get out of the day as well.
I think I totally agree with all those. I think that, yeah, it's preparation, making sure everybody knows exactly what's happening, preparation. I think I totally agree. Excellent. Is there anything else you would say to everybody listening before we go?
The filming days are really fun, and that you get so much content out of them, and they're really
They
worth
are
doing.
really fun.
They are really fun. But no, I think that, yeah, as long as you're prepared for a filming day, you can get so much content out of them, and they're really well worth doing.
And actually, as an added tip, one thing I would say is, although they are a military operation, and they totally are, it's always fun if you can squeeze in any little extras, like if we can quickly throw somebody in front of the camera to do something really quick for social media, or just think all those sort of things when you're there, because the more we can film, the better, because we're only there for 2 days or however long it is, or 2 or 3 days. So yeah, get the most out of it, and it's really, really fun. Excellent. Yeah. Lovely. Well, thanks, Becca, for everything today. I hope everybody got lots out of this podcast. It's certainly an interesting topic for us. And I think hopefully this will help people to prepare for filming days, so that everything goes totally smoothly and you end up with amazing videos at the end of it, which would be awesome. Hope everyone has an amazing day. If there's any more information you need about anything around medical device marketing, visit our website. We have a huge amount of information on there. Or if you have any questions, just reach out to either me, Becca, or any of the team. Lovely. Speak to everybody later. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye.